as you may know, there is a state visit coming up of President Xi Jinping in Italy on the 22nd and 23rd, so actually next week. And it has been leaked ahead of time that at the occasion of this state visit, the Italians will sign a memorandum of understanding with China to cooperate with the Belt and Road Initiative. And that has caused a complete uproar. You had a huge freak out by the Financial Times. You had an intervention by a person called Garrett Marcus, who is somehow in the vicinity of Bolton around the White House, who basically said the Italians will have absolutely no benefit of this and it will ruin their image in the world for a very long time to come. So it came quite timely that we had this event in Milan, which was a co-sponsored event between Movisol, which is the Movimento Solidarietà, the Italian sister organization of the La Rouge movement, headed by Liliane Gorini, and the region of Lombardy, who co-sponsored this event. And so the subject was indeed the collaboration of Italy with the Belt and Road Initiative. The event was long planned ahead of time. So it's a pure coincidence that it occurred just in front of the before the state visit of Xi Jinping. So the first speaker of this occasion was Michele Geraci, who is the undersecretary, I think, of the economic ministry. And he is, he's a very knowledgeable person about China because he was there as a professor teaching for 10 years. And he is now the head of the task force on China of the Italian government. So he gave a presentation where he basically played down the uproar around this memorandum of understanding by basically saying it will not change anything. It will not change Italy's alliance with NATO nor the European Union. It just means that Italy will have more export opportunities in the fastest growing economic market in the world, which is China. And Italy is just trying to catch up with other European countries like Germany and France, who already have much more trade with China. So he gave a very, calm and optimistic picture how this will benefit the development of the ports, Trieste, Genoa, Palermo, and also infrastructure developments. And he said this will not mean to give anything away, like giving infrastructure away or so, because these are all new investments. The Chinese will build new docks in some of these parts, so it will be greenfield investments which will increase the productivity of the Italian economy, and there is actually no reason to be worried about it. So I think this was very informative, and where then I gave the second speech where I basically, said it's actually in a larger context, because what is happening very clearly is that the Chinese government is trying to establish a new paradigm, which Xi Jinping always calls the community or the shared community of a joint future of humanity, or the community of destiny of the one mankind. And they are trying to build a new set of international relations, which basically, overcomes geopolitics. And I mentioned the fact that, there in history there were 16 cases where the secondary power would rise and bypass the up to that point dominant power, and that in 12 cases it led to war, and that in 4 cases it just meant that the second power would take the place of the first power and bypass it without war. And I emphasize the fact that the Chinese government, and especially Xi Jinping, have made very clear many times that it is not the intention to replace the United States in a dominant role in the world, and they naturally also don't want to have a war, but that they offer a completely new way of relating to each other based on the respect for the sovereignty of the other, the difference of the social system, and just cooperate on a win-win basis. And I said that it's really funny because when Xi Jinping announced the Belt and Road Initiative in 2013 in September in Kazakhstan, for about 4 years, this largest infrastructure program in history developed very quickly. And now there are, I think, 112 countries who have different degrees of cooperation and another 30 or 40 international institutions. And for about 4 weeks, the Western media and the major think tanks, uh, did not mention much at all, basically neglecting or pretending this largest infrastructure project in history was not there. And then after approximately 4 years, in an obvious coordinated way, all the media and all the think tanks all of a sudden started a attack on China, as basically saying this is just Chinese imperialism. They're trying to get the countries into the debt trap. They are authoritarian system. And in a certain sense, it's very clear this is the geopolitical reflex reacting to the fact that the world is clearly very quickly changing, and that the power center has already shifted to Asia, with China taking a leading role in this development. So I think that the obvious solution to this crisis. And then one big accusation, naturally, is also that China is splitting Europe, dividing Europe. I mean, actually, there are already 13 countries who have signed MOUs with China, and Italy will be the first G7 country, which is why they are so absolutely nervous about it, because obviously this is the third largest economy on the continent, or even no, on the continent. So, I mean, obviously, the solution, I made strongly the point that it did not need China to divide Europe. The European Union is divided all by itself. Look at the division between the North and the South because of the brutal austerity policy of the EU Commission, which completely impoverished Greece, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and there's a clear division on that point, and another one on the migrant issue, which is a clear divide between Eastern and Western Europe. And in a matter of fact, China has made many times the argument, and I fully agree, that the Belt and Road Initiative and the cooperation with that is actually the way to unite Europe, provided that, let's say, France and Germany would recognize that it also means tremendous business opportunity for them to join. If all these European countries would basically say it is in our best interest to cooperate not only in multilateral trade and investment agreements in the Eurasian continent, but especially to develop Africa together as the only human way to deal with the refugee crisis, it could lead to a very good development. But the EU will have a summit on this subject on the 21st of March, and they have already put out a 10-point action plan. Basically, it's clearly an effort to counter this influence of China. And then they will have an EU-China summit at the beginning of April. And it's very clear that the EU Commission is very much on a different course than Italy. But let's see. I think the visit of Xi Jinping will be successful, and it will show new ways for everybody how it is in everybody's best interest to cooperate.